Okay, back again. We're going to do book 1 today, which is Blood Hunt Rolling Thunder. Now, before we start, again, there's a couple of things we need to go over. All of the FAC agents and field agents and desk and administrative agents are all required to keep journals, per se. Not a personal journal. Those are private. These journals are for if something happens to them, their commanding officers can look to see what may have possibly gone wrong. If they're observing something that they can't verbalize in a report, they can put it in a journal. And then when they turn in their reports, they can also hand in their journals. So Kai has been faithfully keeping a journal for a long time, and hers is rather battered looking after all this time. Now, in book 1, she is a chief warrant officer. And Kai's a loner. And 99% of the time, she carries out the militia assignments without any help. But when she does do assignments with other people, sometimes the results are rather spectacular, as in the time she blew up a dam accidentally. She did say it really was a fine diversion, but nobody else seemed to be amused by it. Well, one fateful day, she's teamed up with a very handsome partner, which upsets her because she has an ingrained fear of men because of what her uncle did to her when she was younger. She has horrific scars across her back and her arms for where he whipped her because, well, he was a racist and she was a half-breed and he did not approve of his sister's marriage. And so she has to overcome her ingrained fear of men and help save the planet from a twisted evil threatening to consume it. And her partner, Michael, who is renamed later on, you have to wonder if he can learn to unwind and accept the fact there comes a time when going by the book just doesn't apply. So in this alternate world of our great-great-grandchildren, all is not what it appears to be. On the surface, there's also something else about Kai. She's a mutant hunter, a mutant monster hunter, and a bounty hunter when she's not working with the FAC. Remember, I told you, the agents also have outside interests and outside jobs. So on the surface, Chief Warrant Officer Kayla Day Ann McMahon is an unfeeling, cold-blooded hunter of mutant monsters. Plus, she's a top-notch survival trainer and a fearless field operative. They're pretty much sure that Kai does not know the word fear. Her off-duty persona of a bounty hunter is just as unyielding. She is someone you definitely do not trifle with. However, being a half Osage Indian and half Irish does have its drawbacks, especially when you're a very strong, untrained elementalist who can speak with the planet. Remember, we've talked about this. Well, First Lieutenant Michael Yamato has his own set of problems, which nearly mirror his new partners. However, where she's a child of nature, he is a former Air Force captain with a powerful and well-trained control over the elements. A stern control that seems to rule every aspect of his life, personal and professional. So somehow they have to learn to work together to save the world. And she has to learn to trust this man, her field commander, and Michael has to learn to see through her tough exterior. So when people begin turning up dead or missing, the new partners uncover a conspiracy that goes beyond the borders of free America. And Kai learns just who had her father killed, which presents an even bigger headache for Michael because now he sees his partners on a hunt all her own. Khan, her father's killer, and the evil of which they hunt, must now pay for his crimes, and her mixed heritage demands blood for blood. So in the end, his past deeds, his arrogance, and his incessant quest for breeding a superior race, and one very angry Indian woman, is his doom. But they have to wonder by the end of the book, is his reign of terror truly over? So we start out, along with the introduction, which I'm not going to read again because you've already heard the introduction, We start out, let me adjust this just a bit. Oh, that's better. We start out with a prologue, which is an excerpt from Chief Warrant Officer Kayla Diane McMahon's private journal. 31 December 2102, Monday. Location, FAC Way Station near Chicago, Illinois, Free America. Time, 1600 hours. New Year's Day is only 8 hours from now. I've been so busy this past month, there wasn't time to register the white man's holiday. I should be sitting in front of the roaring fireplace at my great-great-grandmother's house, watching the new year come in, as I've done for my entire life, with the thought if I watched it long enough, I'd understand the reasoning behind the custom. Unfortunately, after 27 years, it's still a complete mystery. Instead, I find myself in a small way station sleeping berth located 50 miles from Chicago. Give or take 20 miles. I'm too tired to ask Mother Earth for a pinpoint location. What's so compelling to journey in the dead of winter via horseback instead of riding in the comfort of some vehicle? Well, the situation started 1 month ago. As you will note, my last journal entry was just before I took a platoon out into the frigid wilderness for the winter survival training. From nearly the very beginning of this training session, I had a niggle in the back of my mind. Something just felt wrong with Mother Earth. For the life of me, I simply couldn't understand the what. It really was most annoying since I was trying to concentrate on my platoon. After all, one wrong move could cost lives, like what happened during that one midsummer training course. She had a person on in the training course who took his life using poisonous mushrooms, and she tried valiantly for over an hour or more to save his life, and it didn't work, and it's preyed on her mind ever since. All month long, the wrongness persisted, and by the 25th, it just wouldn't leave me alone. You can imagine my concern to be awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of a woman crying. Scrambling from my snow-covered sleeping bag, I did a thorough search, even waking up my sergeant to help me find this apparently lost soul. But there wasn't anyone around other than my platoon. Now that got me spooked. Anyone can tell you it takes a lot to rattle this Indian. 4 days ago, I was wrapping up the training session when one of those knock-you-down, take-over-your-body visions hit me. I saw a female scientist out east in grave danger, and Mother Earth was insisting if we didn't rescue her, all of the Bloods could likely die, or worse. I remember seeing, hearing, and feeling explosions, people screaming, and a great deal of pain. Plus, that wrongness of something missing had grown stronger. Whatever it is, it too is out east. When I recovered from the strong visions, I found myself sitting with the elders of the tribe. After a great deal of discussion, they felt the visions and strong impressions were far too important to ignore. So, even though I'm not due there for almost 3 weeks, they ordered me to physically report in to FAC headquarters in Chicago. Unfortunately, the transport trucks were long gone by the time I got out of the council meeting. My old Jeep refuses to work most of the time in winter, and the snow is too deep for regular vehicles to get in or out. So I'm riding canny old Mootke, my stallion, since he's the only other viable transportation that was immediately available. I've often wondered if perhaps he's a mutant, mostly because of his size. I wanted to leave Thunder behind, but he had other ideas on that one. And one simply does not argue with Thunder. It's been a wild 4 days journey across Missouri, then up through Illinois. Throughout the entire trip, I've been seeing various visions of the scientist. The poor girl sure does seem scared about something. What's worried me the most are the sounds of explosions. Plus, I keep seeing flames. Oh, and something new has been added to the visions. Blood on the snow. Whenever I've tried to see more, the vision just fades away. This is very worrisome, as I'd like to know whose blood it is I'm seeing. I mean, if it's mine, having advance warning would be nice. At least it could be prepared for, or a way found to avoid said spilling of blood. I rather like where mine is. You'd think after all these years I'd have firmer control over the abilities Mother Earth gifted me with. Now I'm being plagued by a strange low-pitched humming noise. Even Thunder hears it, and is constantly shaking his head and sneezing. He says it hurts his ears. By my rough reckoning, we should arrive in Chicago at headquarters around 0530, 0600 tomorrow. Hopefully, Captain Tillman will be able to make sense of all this. Rumor has it he's in charge of the field operatives because of the flu epidemic running rampant through the city. Tillman is the commander of my company, so I am familiar with the man. Since he's higher up in the chain of command, it's a rare moment to come face to face with him. Well, okay, there was that one incident a few years ago. That's how Thunder became acquainted with the man, and now goes running off to find him whenever we're at headquarters. They're bosom buddies now, which does help having someone in the know about Thunder's abilities. Normally, Tillman leaves the management duties to Lieutenant Charles Jacobson, who commands my unit, and another man I have never met. It would feel strange not reporting to the regular unit commander. For some reason, I had the impression Lieutenant Jacobson never got sick. Then again, I'm sure it will feel extremely odd for the captain to be directly in charge of the units. I think he has a second in command under him. At least I've seen a man coming and going, who is rumored to be Tillman's second. He's a very aloof sort of fellow, and his eyes, whoa, they could freeze water. Ah well, I should stop speculating on all this and just be satisfied there are still some people at headquarters well enough to take my report. I just peeked out the window and the snow is falling again, but we should be able to get through. I'm off to grab a short nap. Happy New Year, Kai. End journal entry. Now, we segue to chapter 1 from somebody else's point of view, Michael's, who's been sick with the flu, so he's a little peevish. Finding a parking spot no closer than a block away was a bloody damned nuisance. The snow had been heavy on his drive into Chicago, which didn't help Michael feel any better. But as long as he was in the car, everything was fine. Thank goodness he kept such meticulous care of the vehicle. After he parked and got out was another reminder of just how miserable he truly felt. It was just too damn cold and snowing and horrible, and his coat wasn't warm enough, etc. But as soon as he walked into the FAC headquarters building, it felt too hot for him, and he couldn't get out of his overcoat quickly enough. By the time he got to Captain Tillman's offices, well, technically their offices, since he was now Tillman's second in command, Michael was actually sweating slightly. But anyone who might have paid close attention would naturally assume the slight dampness in the light hair at the back of his collar and the hair at his temples would be from the snow outside. Stepping into the outer room of the offices, Michael peevishly felt it to be too warm in there as well. They've turned the heat up too high. Hell, once I get to my office, I'll turn it down to a more reasonable temperature. Looking up from some work she had been doing, Marcia, the secretary they utilized, frowned in concern upon seeing how pale Michael was, but nevertheless smiled pleasantly at him. He was rather handsome, despite his pallor. "Good morning, Lieutenant Yamato. Welcome back. Captain Tillman is expecting you. Go right on in." Nodding shortly, Michael didn't like the way Marcia just looked him over like a mother, deciding if a child is fit to go to school, and inwardly thinking he wasn't. Choosing to ignore the look, he walked over to the captain's door, knocked soft twice, still trying to ignore how closely Marcia was watching him, then walked on in, softly shutting the door behind him. That was what Marcia had been waiting for, the lieutenant to disappear. Snatching up the phone, she called down to the infirmary looking for Dr. Tomalinda. "Yes, Dr. Toma, this is Marcia up in Captain Tillman's office. Listen, Lieutenant Yamato just reported in, and he doesn't look good at all." What? Well, his color is way off. Do you think perhaps you could spare a few minutes? Yes, I know. He wouldn't admit to being sick. Thank you. We'll see you shortly. Hanging up the phone after double-checking some facts, Captain Tillman returned Michael's salute, then gestured towards one of the chairs. Sit, sit. I think you might find this rather intriguing. Sitting primly in one of the chairs in front of Tillman's desk, laying his overcoat over the arm, Michael sat erect, not about to let his posture betray for an instant that he was in less than perfect health. Despite his best efforts to produce a normal voice, he felt it sounded far too hoarse. Thank you, sir. What's the situation? Handing Michael the prepared mission profile, Tillman rubbed one side of his jaw for a moment in deep thought, and then grinned before launching into the briefing. Tillman's like that. We've wanted to get to the scientists at NYTI, which is the New York Thematic Institute, for some time now, since there was talk they were onto something. Well, this morning we got a break on that. CTI, which is the Chicago Thematic Institute, received a phone call from a Dr. Joseph Wilcox of NYTI. He has a scientist there, Melissa McLean, who urgently needs to get out of socialist territory. She has some information that's vital to not just free America, but to Bloods as well. Apparently, her life is in danger. We need for you to get in there and get her out. Glancing up from the mission profile he'd been reading, Michael fixed his commanding officer with those icy blue eyes of his for a moment. Is there any conclusion at this point whom the perpetrators are? Softly trying to clear his throat, he was relieved to find it was a barely noticeable sound. Or why McLean was targeted? Shaking his head, Tillman wished he had an answer to that one. I'm sorry, Lieutenant. We haven't the first clue as to who it is. All they know is that there have been some spectacular attempts on her life. At least they're pretty sure she's been targeted. The young lady in question is able to repel psychic attacks, turning them back on the perpetrators, and she's quite strong at it. But she needs training to focus it, and they don't have the knowledge to help Miss McLean. Officially, they want her to come to CTI for the training. Dr. Wilcox coded the rest of the message. According to the communication, McLean is carrying vital information which CTI wants. Digesting the information, Michael mentally did a brief calculation of his team construction, deciding he wanted a team of 5 plus himself. 2 to handle Freeside communications, 4 for the insertion team, with 2 of the insertion team to set up outside NYTI, and 1 to walk in with him under some guise. Innate metapsychic shielding. That in itself is enough to intrigue CTI, I'm sure. Looking down at the personnel file in front of him, Tillman sighed and rubbed his forehead again. Knowing his second in command, there was going to be hell to pay for this next bit of news. Well, might as well get it over with and let the chips fall where they may. Lieutenant, as you know, there's been a flu epidemic going on. I'm afraid we've not been immune to its depredations. We're short-handed here at the moment, and I can only give you one person. She's good, though. Damn good. Although how she's pulled off some of her missions is a bit of a mystery. Chief Warrant Officer Kayla Day McMahon. As he quietly handed her thick file over to Michael, Tillman had to smile. Kai is unique. Oh, here. He handed Kai's the journal to the lieutenant and nodded at the battered book. You'll need to read the entries that I earmarked. It will give you a greater insight why I chose a chief to go with you. Weighing the heavy file and journal in his hand, Michael pinned to CO for another moment with his pale blue eyes. He flat didn't like this at all. And even though he kept his emotions off his face, it was quite clear he wasn't exactly overjoyed at the implications of just the sheer size of the file in his hand. Michael figured it meant either a psych case or a discipline problem that he was being saddled with. Sitting back in his office, Tillman returned that familiar gaze, then grinned again. All right, out with it. We've known each other a long time, so I know you have some comments you'd like to make on this situation. Clearing his throat, Michael tried his best to hide the hoarseness by speaking as softly as he could. Glancing at the file in his lap, he arranged his thoughts carefully. I find the situation deplorable, sir. I've been handed one file rather than the 5 I need. And this one is as thick as the 5. You know what that means. And if I may speak frankly, I would rather execute the mission as a solo than be saddled with a problem child, sir. A rescue mission into red territory is not a good place to take a psych case, or worse, a disciplinary problem. Raising an eyebrow at the comments, Tillman shook his head while thinking of the chief and her determined cross-country dash to deliver what she felt was urgent news of something coming. Lieutenant, you may think she's a psych case, and I'll admit there's one small area where she is, but has nothing to do with her job with us. Despite her shortcomings in that area, she's never failed to come through for us. The first time I met her, I wasn't sure she'd work out. But, well, read the files on her, and you'll understand why I feel she's the one for the job. There was a distinctive ache starting up right around the center of Michael's forehead. Rubbing it, he decided perhaps a couple of backup plans were in order. One he was already formulating. Sorry about sitting back. My back hurts. One he was already formulating, not knowing yet that this plan might be difficult for his psych case partner to manage. If all else failed, he could put a bullet in her head if he had to get the client out to safety. Stoically straightening his shoulders and putting the thick file and journal under one arm, he nodded to Tillman, signifying he'd accept the partner. I'll deal with it, sir, whatever happens. Is there anything else, sir? Yes, as a matter of fact, there is. Hold one moment, please. Picking up his phone, Tillman activated a buzzer on Marcia's desk. When she answered, all he said was, "Send her in now, please." Returning the phone to his cradle, he waited for the fireworks. Initially annoyed that his CO did not allow him the dignity of interviewing his problem child in his own office, Michael got up to greet her anyway, only to note that it was not his new subordinate that walked in the door, but instead was Dr. Tama, who gave him her usual cheerful greeting. Sinking down on his chair, he stared at her for a stunned moment, then turned a hard, accusing stare at Tillman with compressed lips. Now he was very annoyed. Trying not to chuckle at the way Michael was looking at him, Tillman smoothly rose from his chair to make his escape. Michael, there's been a flu epidemic. We can't take chances. Good luck on your mission, and I'll see you both for debriefing upon your return. Dr. Tama, I leave him in your capable hands. Leaving his office, Tillman closed the door behind him and gave Marcia a thumbs-up signal. That was quick thinking, calling her up like that. I know I can always count on you. We'll skip over chapter 2 because it's mostly Dr. Tama giving him some treatments for the flu and for his lingering flu that he still has, and him swearing that she's trying to kill him and he would like to shoot her now. And her assuring him that he wasn't the only one who had a reaction like that. His new partner, in her ever cheerful manner, decked her assistant. So Michael's like, oh, great. Okay, we start out chapter 3 with an excerpt from First Lieutenant Michael Yamamoto's journal. Date, 2103, January 1, Tuesday. Time, 1400 hours CST. Location, Chicago, Illinois, FAC Central Headquarters. Being as it is the first day of the new year, it is a time for new beginnings. Take, for example, my beginning a new journal. I usually do one every year and start with something along these lines. My name is Yamamoto Mikuru no Yakima. That's as close as I can get. That is my Japanese name. But being as I was born in Tendring, England, and grew up as a British national, I go by Michael Yamoto. That is the way my name appears on my citizenship papers here in free America. My military identification cites both. I like to start each one out this way for some reason. I think it gives me a chance to recap the year before and reestablish myself a bit. Maybe it's the idea that if someone 100 years from now found my journals and only found one of them in a readable state, he'll still know who I was. It's interesting to look through them from year to year and just read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs to see how I have changed, or how my perceptions of myself have changed. It shows what is important to me on a given first day of the year because of what I talk about. I served in the United States Air Force for nearly 4 years, piloting fighter jets such as the F-26 and the M-24B. I left the Air Force and took a position by direct transfer into the Free America Civil Militia as a reservist specialist agent of the Specials Department, where I served another 4 years. My rank went from captain to lieutenant, but the rank is roughly equivalent between the two services. I actually have more responsibilities as a lieutenant in the FAC than I did as a captain in the Air Force. Well, I think I can start the story from here, but let me clarify something that may become important fairly early on. A specials agent is assigned to a wide variety of missions, mostly things that the official military is unable to handle because of the touchy situation between Free America and the Socialist States of America. Officially, the SSA is still a part of the U.S. The secession has never been acknowledged, so the U.S. military cannot act against any of them or their people. It's a constitutional violation. The larger militias, however, can, because they represent domestic protection. I seem to be quite good at search and rescue missions and that sort of thing, though I was hired for my sharpshooting abilities, coupled with my ability to control elemental energies. For the last year until the present, I was on the inactive roster, just reporting every 2 weeks for situational updates from my CO and a little firearms practice. You see, I broke my leg last year and have been inactive since then while I mended fully. It's been a strange year to say the least, though. I had planned to return to full-time duty in mid-January this year to make up for being completely useless for a year. Nels, his girlfriend, has known since November. My leg is healed, though it aches when it's cold or damp. I still limp a bit then, or when I'm tired, or I've been on it too long. Just the same, my physical that month rated my legs sound, and I am fit for active duty. When I was given a clean bill of health, Nels and I agreed that it would be a bad idea to try to maintain the kind of relationship that we have currently. Danielle, or Nels, is not the kind of girl that can be left waiting for her man to come home. And I am not so arrogant as to think I could change that. Nor do I feel it would be fair for her to expect me to expect it. She and I have become fine friends, but we are not in love. She deserves better. My plan to return to full duty has been marred by a particularly nasty bout with the flu. In the hospital, out of the hospital, back in again. The nurses joked about permanently giving me my own room. But thankfully, by New Year's Day, I felt stable enough to sit up and watch the Rose Bowl parade with Nels. There is a saying that whatever you are doing on New Year's Day is what you will be doing the rest of the year. I hoped not. I felt like shit. I've seen on the news that this flu bug seems to be hitting thematically inclined people much harder than those without the inclination. Some have even died from the thing. I am a blood, and we think Nels is normal, but our relationship hasn't been marred by that fact. The Rose Bowl parade was, of course, as boring as ever. I was only half watching it as I sat on the couch with my long legs sprawled out in front of me, one foot on the coffee table and one on the floor, my eyes half closed. Nels was curled up next to me. I'm more than a foot taller than her. I'm quite tall, especially for a man with as much Japanese blood as I have. I have my mother's side of the family with all of its Cherokee and Blackfoot influence to thank for that, I think. though my father was taller than most Japanese men. Nels is quite petite, only about 5 feet tall, so curled up as she was, she fit under my arm quite neatly, as it lay rather negligently around her shoulders. Just when I felt I simply could not take another moment of float after parade float, a special bulletin flashed across the screen. Sometime around midnight, 11 last night, by our time here in Illinois, the world had watched the skies in shock as an explosive device of some unbelievable magnitude had been detonated in the edge of the atmosphere. The brilliant flash could only have been a thermonuclear blast, a demonstration of power that could have come from nowhere other than the ancient Red Army at the command of New Moscow on the lunar surface. Naturally, I grabbed my cell phone and called into headquarters, holding up one hand to still Nels' protests that I was still too sick to report in. I was placed on hold instantly after being informed that Tillman had been trying to reach me and was expecting my call. I took the moment to take another deep swig from my ever-present bottle of ginger ale. Tillman came on the line almost too quickly. The conversation was brief, since I was not on a secure line in the least. The gist of it was that I was to get my ass back to Chicago as fast as I could and report in person. He didn't say it directly, but it was apparent that he had a job for me, and oddly enough, it didn't appear to have anything to do with the nuke overhead. Nels was crying a bit when I jumped into my car, but I couldn't dwell on it. I plugged my key crystal into the ignition and thumbed the button. She was more than welcome to stay at the house until her brother came to help her lock things up. The car is over 100 years old. It had belonged to my great-great-grandmother long before I was ever born. It was a 1981 Datsun 280ZX. She had named it Zot, of all things. Almost none of the parts were original now. I'd rebuilt the car from the frame up, and did a lot of framework too, for that matter. It had been a project started out of curiosity about the old car. I wanted to know how it worked. It had evolved into a passion that might border on obsession, as I converted it from an old-style gasoline-driven internal combustion machine to a modern alcohol compression engine. I'd wanted the car to look and feel today as much like it had back in 1980, when it had rolled off the assembly line, as much as was possible with modern technology. A fusion electric motor couldn't give me that. They just don't feel the same as a compression engine. Logically, I know that the modular compression engine that I put in it is more powerful and has a very different rhythm than the simple 4-cylinder combustion engine did. Despite that, normally the feel of that engine turning over and roaring to life with 16 cylinders of heart-pumping explosive compression is something that sends a thrill to me that is almost sexual. I built that engine, and by God, I kept the name. It seemed to fit the car's personality. Well, the drive into Chicago was frustrating. For one thing, I had the flu, still, and it was snowing a lot. Reporting for duty was an exercise in patience and acute pain. Tillman has given me one team member for the upcoming mission, and from the thickness of her file, I can only surmise she is a problem child for the FAC militia. I've been assured the chief, short for Chief Warrant Officer, isn't a huge problem, just different. That does not reassure me in the slightest. They've given me a person that may or may not be a psych case, and we're going into a dangerous, potentially fatal situation. To add insult to injury, Dr. Tama gave me a shot of something right up my nose. Thought I was going to die, and afraid I wasn't. Frankly, I'd rather have the flu. Then the doctor sweetly informed me that my partner, Chief Warrant Officer Kayla Dayan McMahon, reacted to the same medicine in a far more violent manner. Well, now, isn't this just ducky? A violent psycho partner. Enough whining. The chief is due in just about an hour, and I need to weed through this file. See if there's a way I can salvage this mess. End entry. The deeper into his partner's file Michael read, the more certain he was that this woman was a walking enigma. First of all, Kai was half Osage Indian and half Irish, which seemed to give her some unsettling blood abilities. According to the training files, she could talk with the planet and pretty much every animal that walked, crawled, slithered, etc. upon the face of said planet. And if that wasn't enough, Kai was more than just a survival expert. She could also blend into the world around her, even to the point of seemingly vanishing, and was documented doing so on many occasions, sometimes even completely unnerving anyone that was unfortunately startled by her sudden reappearance, generally accomplished right in front of them. Kai could be argumentative, belligerent, headstrong, and definitely liked to work alone. According to the mission briefs, all hell was liable to break loose if the chief worked with others, and sometimes even on her solo missions. From accidentally blowing up a dam, participating in mutant monster hunts, one of which landed her in critical care after it nearly killed her, to blithely choosing an escape route with the target she'd gone in to rescue without letting HQ know what she was doing. The woman was, without a doubt, a modern-day Amazon clad in old-fashioned moccasins. Her medical records worried Michael even more. Horrific scars crisscrossed her back and arms, yet never a word about who had done this barbaric thing to her. There was only one way a person got scars like that: a whip. Kai hated, nearly feared the medical world, and even put one doctor into intensive care when he dared to touch her without asking first. But God help any fool who